It was a quiet Sunday in Birch Hollow, a sleepy town tucked between wooded hills and farmland, where people rarely locked their doors and gossip traveled faster than the wind. 17-year-old Lily Thompson was the kind of girl everyone seemed to like, smart, kind, always smiling. That afternoon, she told her dad she was heading out for a walk to the nearby park, maybe to clear her head or meet a friend. She slipped out the front door just as the sun started to dip behind the trees. It was nothing unusual. Just another peaceful day. Her father, Mark Thompson, didn't think much of it at first. Lily often went out on her own. Sometimes she'd sit by the lake with her sketchbook, other times she'd grab coffee with friends. She was responsible, always home by dinner. But when 7 o'clock came and went, he started to feel uneasy. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen table, forgotten or left behind. Mark figured she'd be back any minute. Maybe she'd just lost track of time. But the minutes stretched into hours, and Lily didn't come home. By 10 o'clock, panic had taken hold. Mark called her closest friends, but none of them had seen her that day. He drove to the park, shouting her name into the darkness, his flashlight beam bouncing off empty swings and shadowed benches. There was no sign of her. Not even footprints near the walking trail she loved. The wind had picked up, rustling the trees in a way that made the silence feel heavier. At midnight, he reported her missing to the local police. Officers arrived, calm but not too concerned. They asked the standard questions. Had Lily ever run away? Was she having problems at school? Did she seem upset? Mark insisted this wasn't like her. She was planning for college, thinking about the future. She had no reason to vanish. Still, the initial investigation moved slowly. The assumption was that she'd left on her own and would return in a day or two. Posters were printed, social media posts shared, but there were no real leads. The town came together, organizing small search groups. They checked the woods, the old train yard, even the creek that wound behind the school. Nothing turned up. The security cameras around the park weren't working that day. It was as if Lily had simply stepped out of existence. As the days dragged on, the emptiness in the house grew unbearable. Her room remained untouched, the bed still made, her favorite hoodie draped over the chair. Mark stopped sleeping, stopped eating much, spent his nights refreshing news pages and forums, hoping someone, somewhere had seen her. The town's sense of safety began to crack. Parents kept closer watch on their children. Lights stayed on longer at night. Behind every friendly smile, there was now a question. What happened to Lily Thompson? And why did it feel like someone knew more than they were saying? 3 weeks passed without a single trace of Lily. The flyers, once bright and hopeful, had begun to fade on telephone poles and store windows. Rain had washed away the ink on some, and others had been torn down or covered by new posters. People still talked about her, but not as often. The buzz of urgency had dulled into a quiet ache. Even the search parties had dwindled. Mark Thompson, however, hadn't stopped. Every morning he left the house and retraced the same areas, the park, the trails, the bus stops, hoping to find something everyone else had missed. But nothing ever changed. Until one morning, everything did. It was a janitor at the Graceway Baptist Church who noticed it first. He was taking the garbage out behind the building, dragging 2 heavy bins across the back lot. The morning was cool, and the usual birdsong was absent. As he reached for the 3rd bin, a foul, sour odor stopped him. It wasn't just trash, it was something deeper, heavier. He assumed it was spoiled food or a dead animal. With a grunt, he pried open the lid. That's when he saw the edge of a rolled-up rug. At first, it didn't register. But then he noticed the thick plastic wrapping around the edges and a small, pale hand protruding from the middle. Within an hour, the area was swarmed with police, crime scene tape stretched tight across the back alley. The body, wrapped in an old, dusty rug and sealed in black plastic bags, had been there for some time. The investigators worked quickly, carefully lifting the bundle into a vehicle bound for the coroner's office. Rumors spread almost immediately. Some said it was a homeless person, others whispered it might be connected to a drug deal. But by that evening, the town knew the truth. Dental records and a bracelet still clinging to her wrist confirmed it. The body was Lily Thompson. Her disappearance had ended in the worst possible way. News crews gathered outside the church the next morning, their cameras pointed at the dumpster that had become a crime scene. Residents stood in clusters, watching with wide eyes, trying to understand how this could have happened so close to home. Behind the headlines and flashing cameras, Mark Thompson sat silently in the back of a police cruiser, clutching the last school photo of his daughter. He hadn't been allowed to see her body, not yet, but he didn't need to. He already knew. The moment the call came in, something inside him had broken. The autopsy confirmed what the detectives feared. Lily had died from blunt force trauma to the back of the head. There were no signs of a struggle, no defensive wounds, and no indication she had been moved far. The killer had likely disposed of her body soon after the attack, using the church dumpster to avoid suspicion. But who had done this? And why? There were still no suspects, no witnesses, and no camera footage from the surrounding area. The only certainty now was that Lily had never left Birch Hollow. She had been there the entire time, hidden in plain sight, discarded like trash in a place meant for peace. The discovery of Lily's body sent shockwaves through Birch Hollow, but even more disturbing was the lack of answers that followed. With the autopsy confirming the cause of death, detectives began piecing together what little evidence they had. The rug she'd been wrapped in was old and threadbare, the kind often used in garages or basements. The plastic bags were generic, sold at nearly every store in town. No fingerprints. No blood trail. No DNA beyond Lily's. It was as if the killer had planned it all, careful, quiet, and in complete control. Under pressure from the community and local media, police focused on the most obvious suspect, Tyler Mason, Lily's ex-boyfriend. He was 18, moody, and known to have a temper. Their relationship had ended a few months earlier after a string of arguments, some of which were overheard by classmates and even a few teachers. A few neighbors claimed they had seen Tyler near the park on the day Lily disappeared. That was enough to bring him in. Tyler didn't resist when the officers arrived at his home. He looked shaken but not surprised. At the station, he was questioned for hours. They asked about the nature of their relationship, his whereabouts the night Lily vanished, and whether he still had feelings for her. Tyler admitted they'd fought a lot but denied having anything to do with her death. He said he was home that night playing video games. No one could confirm his alibi. Investigators searched his bedroom, his car, even the garage. They collected hair samples, fibers, electronics, anything they thought might connect him to the crime. But days later, the lab results came back with nothing. No trace of Lily was found anywhere in his possession. His phone showed no suspicious movement. The arguments, while emotional, had never turned violent. Despite their best efforts, police couldn't tie him to the scene. He was released without charges, leaving the town divided, some convinced of his guilt, others starting to wonder if they were looking in the wrong direction entirely. While the official investigation stalled, Mark Thompson refused to let the case go cold. He began going through Lily's belongings, desperate to find a missing clue. Her laptop had been locked, but he remembered the password she used for everything, an old nickname from childhood. What he found inside wasn't dramatic at first: homework files, music playlists, photos with friends. But one detail stood out. Lily had visited a small job listing website dozens of times in the weeks before her disappearance. It wasn't a popular site, and most of the listings were for local, off-the-books jobs, house cleaning, dog walking, errands for the elderly. There was a saved post from a man named Walter Greaves, looking for a part-time housekeeper. The ad was vague, with no photo, just an address and a phone number. The last message Lily had sent was to that number, confirming an appointment. It was a lead the police had missed entirely. The name Walter Greaves meant nothing to Mark Thompson at first. It wasn't familiar from Lily's circle of friends, nor had it come up in the investigation. But the more he looked into it, the more unsettled he became. The address from the job listing was real, a crumbling Victorian house near the edge of town, hidden behind a wall of overgrown hedges and half-dead trees. Mark drove past it once in the early morning, his heart pounding as he stared at the dark windows. It looked abandoned, but the mailbox was full and a faint light glowed from one upstairs room. Mark took the information to the police. At first, they were skeptical. After all, they'd already searched the park, interviewed everyone close to Lily, and had no record of her ever working for anyone unofficially. But the message history on her laptop was undeniable. Lily had responded to the job listing, and there was a good chance she'd gone to that house. Investigators quickly shifted focus. They ran a background check on Walter Greaves. He was 73, retired, and had lived in Birch Hollow for decades. He had no criminal record, no recent complaints, and no known family. Most neighbors described him as reclusive and strange, but harmless. A man who rarely left the house and kept to himself. Police secured a warrant and arrived at Greaves's home. The interior was a mess, piles of newspapers, peeling wallpaper, and the smell of mold and something worse. In one room, tucked behind a stack of old furniture, they found a small closet where a jacket had been stuffed away. It was Lily's, still stained, her name tag from school still pinned to the front. In the bathroom, they discovered her hairbrush in a drawer, strands still tangled in the bristles. But the most disturbing find was in the garage, a rug identical to the one Lily's body had been wrapped in. A piece of it had been cut away. It was a match. Greaves was arrested on the spot. At first, he said nothing, staring blankly at the wall of the interview room. Hours passed before he finally spoke. His story was strange and scattered. He claimed Lily had come to clean the house, slipped in the hallway, and hit her head. He panicked and didn't call for help. Instead, he wrapped her body and dumped it behind the church, too afraid to face the consequences. But that version didn't align with the autopsy. The head injury had been severe, delivered with force, nothing like a simple fall. And Lily's phone, which had never left the house, was found hidden in a drawer inside his bedroom. It became clear to the detectives that Greaves was lying. His panic wasn't the reaction of someone dealing with an accident. It was the behavior of someone trying to hide something darker. As the search continued, they started looking beyond just Lily's murder. There was something about that house, something that didn't feel like a first-time crime. And it wouldn't take long before they discovered that Lily wasn't his only victim. With Walter Greaves in custody, the investigation took a darker turn. Detectives returned to his home, this time with a more thorough search warrant and a larger team. They were no longer looking for clues related only to Lily Thompson. They were looking for anything that might explain what kind of man Walter really was. The house, once dismissed as the residence of a lonely old man, now looked more like a carefully maintained shell, hiding decades of secrets. In the basement, officers discovered a door that had previously gone unnoticed. It was painted to match the wall and locked tight with a rusted bolt. After forcing it open, they were met with the unmistakable stench of mildew, decay, and something else, something wrong. Behind that door was a hidden room, unlike any other in the house. The walls were soundproofed with thick padding. A heavy chair sat in the center, bolted to the floor. Nearby were shelves lined with VHS tapes, stacks of old film reels, and dozens of labeled folders. It was a disturbing archive, carefully organized and terrifying in its purpose. Among the contents were photographs, handwritten notes, and personal items belonging to young women, none of them Lily. Investigators quickly realized what they were dealing with. Walter Greaves had been operating in silence for years, possibly decades. The files revealed names that had once appeared in missing persons reports, some dating back 20 years. Girls who had vanished without a trace, dismissed as runaways, forgotten by the system. Lily was not the first. She was just the last one he had time to hide. The news sent shockwaves beyond Birch Hollow. Media outlets from across the state arrived to cover what was now being called the hidden room case. Mark Thompson, still reeling from the loss of his daughter, now faced the truth that she had unknowingly walked into the hands of a serial predator. The idea that her final moments had taken place inside that basement, behind a locked door, broke something inside him. Walter offered no real confession. He rambled during interviews, sometimes speaking in riddles or pretending not to understand the questions. But the evidence was overwhelming. Prosecutors gathered enough to charge him not only with Lily's murder, but with the likely abductions and killings of at least 4 other girls. The tapes, the items, the records. He had documented everything, as if proud of what he had done. The town of Birch Hollow would never be the same. Families who had once believed their daughters had simply run away were now confronting the painful reality that they had been taken, harmed, and silenced. And in the center of it all was a man no one had truly noticed, quiet, polite, invisible. Mark chose to speak out. Not for attention, but for the daughters who never made it home. He started a foundation in Lily's name, dedicated to finding missing teens and advocating for deeper investigations into unsolved disappearances. His grief never faded, but he refused to let her story end in silence. Lily's name would now live on, not as a victim, but as the spark that brought justice to light.